Welcome to Future of Caregiving.
And what I found is a lot of people complain about things, but very few people are actually willing to do something about it. And when I was asked if I was willing to do something about it, I said yes.
Josh Crisp is the CEO of Solinity, which is a progressive senior living operator that brings generations together to share experiences as well as live and work in a collaborative environment. Josh is also the founder of Pedal for Alzheimer's, a nonprofit charitable platform committed to organizing cycling events to raise money, create awareness, and provide education towards the mission of finding a cure for Alzheimer's. In his limited spare time, he also is on the board for licensing healthcare facilities as a member of Tennessee's Department of Health and Human Services. Hi, I'm your host, Leah Warnke, and this is Future of Caregiving, where we explore the rapidly evolving world of caregiving. From technological advancements to demographic shifts, we'll delve into the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for those who provide care and those who receive it. Join us as we discuss the future of caregiving with experts, care providers, and those with firsthand experience. We'll examine the trends, breakthroughs, and innovative solutions that are shaping the way we care for each other now and in the years to come. Just to start us off, can you describe how did you get involved in the senior living industry?
Well, it is a long story, but for the sake of brevity, I'll tell you, working my way through college, I did not have senior living on my radar, didn't even know what it was. I was selling real estate, doing pretty well in that. And I got a call from a gentleman, an entrepreneur, and asked me if I would be interested in helping him in sort of a real estate and business development role for launching this new prototype that he had. He wanted to do senior care differently and asked me if I knew anything about senior living, and I said absolutely not. And surprisingly, he wanted to talk to me more about it. And as I learned more, I really was attracted to the missional aspect, the compassionate care side, and really impacting people's lives positively. And so eased into that, really on the real estate development side, on finding sites and markets to build a senior living prototype. And as I got more and more involved and got a couple of properties under development, this entrepreneur sort of just kept throwing me into the deeper end of the pool. And before we opened our first couple of communities, I had the opportunity to actually open those, get licensed as an administrator. And that led to, a 9-year run helping build a newly formed company into a pretty large corporate ownership company of communities across the country, and fell in love with the industry. I fell in love with the people that work in the industry and the residents and their families, and really feeling like you could make a positive impact on people's lives. And it's been the greatest choice I ever made, and wouldn't change it.
Wow, that is awesome. I feel like we hear this a decent amount, people just not even being familiar with senior living and then dipping their toe in the water and becoming obsessed, because it is something that, if we're lucky, we'll all experience aging and living in communities with seniors. So I am so excited that you have become so passionate about this. And this company that you're talking about, would this be Solinity? And do you want to describe a little bit more about what you guys do?
So it's my company now, the family of companies under the name of Solinity. That was something I just started about 5 years ago. So my first 9 years in the industry, I helped start a company that someone else owned. And when it became publicly traded, I had some ownership in it. But then, I left the comfort nest of the big corporate environment and really didn't have a backup plan, but I started a consulting company for multiple years in about 2013, 2014, where I helped people that wanted to develop and operate senior living communities be able to launch their platforms, build their platforms, and do that, and was very successful. And that led to, in 2018, launching Solinity, which is now a development company, a management company. We have a full service marketing agency. We have a newly formed leadership division for training and equipping leaders in the industry and helping those get into the industry in leadership positions that aren't in the industry yet. And then we also have a family of ancillary companies. So Solinity, for all intensive purposes now, you could sort of think of it as an incubator for different types of housing programs and services for the aging population, and more specifically for senior living and healthcare.
Nice. Well, it definitely is a scary transition leaving the corporate world, but it sounds like it has worked out well for you. So I'm glad to hear that. In addition to your work with Solinity, you are also the chairman of the Assisted Living Committee on the board for licensing healthcare facilities. So, what is your role in public health and shaping care for healthcare and senior living?
Well, so about 9 years ago, I was asked and appointed by the governor of the state of Tennessee to help oversee healthcare for the state of Tennessee on that board that you mentioned. And there's 18 of us from multiple disciplines in healthcare and senior care. I am the only kind of sole member of that board that comes from specifically the senior living industry. But that board essentially promulgates all the rules for healthcare and all healthcare facilities in the state of Tennessee. So if you think of everything from the hospitals to nursing homes, assisted living centers, residential homes, ambulatory surgical centers, so even things outside of senior living. And it's been really interesting. So a committee that I chair for that board oversees all the licensure, all of the licensed assisted living communities. So when a law is made in the state of Tennessee by legislators or updated, our committee and the board basically takes that law and turns it into rules. And then our board and that health facilities commission for the state then regulates all of those. So all of the surveys and all of the disciplinary issues and all of the interpretive guidelines and things like that. So it's a very important work. I definitely do not take that lightly. It's much different than my daily job because, being out in the communities and developing communities, I have to wear multiple hats because I'm also regulated by the state of Tennessee, and most states have their own regulatory agency that does that, just like the state of Tennessee. So it's allowed me to actually influence, hopefully for good, healthcare and delivery of services, accessibility of services to the residents, citizens of Tennessee. And to be honest, that was never anything I really sought out. I remember being as a young operator, as a young manager of communities, a young administrator, being very frustrated at many of the rules and regulations and questioning, well, why do we do it this way? Why is it written this way? And this is not really helpful, or it's very outdated with the changing technology and times. And what I found is a lot of people complain about things, but very few people are actually willing to do something about it. And when I was asked if I was willing to do something about it, I said yes. And so I found myself now in my third 4-year appointment under 2 separate governors. And it's very interesting work, to say the least.
Wow, definitely sounds interesting and absolutely important work. You mentioned being one of the only representatives from the senior living side of things. I was wondering, is this something, it's just crazy to me that seniors make up such a large proportion of the population of every state, and Tennessee specifically. Do you see this kind of lack of advocacy for senior living across the political spectrum?
I do. I will say this, I have seen more efforts to get more representation. And I think naturally, as the aging population, everybody realizes that. It's as I've gotten into the system, so to speak, it's really interesting in how dynamic it is and how many moving pieces. Our board is formed based on law and legislative process. So there's so many different influencers that all have to get on the same page together and be in agreement to, spend public dollars to be able to increase board or to determine what the board's composition is and what the committee's composition is. So, again, I would say one of the disheartening things that I hope that we can improve, at least in the state of Tennessee, is that there's not at these public meetings that I'm chairing oftentimes. There's very few providers that attend, and these are open to the public. And that's actually how I learned about this board, is because I got frustrated, and information is not really easy to find. You have to dig in to find out, well, who's making these rules and when do they make these rules? And so as I dug in and navigated that process, I started going to these meetings and I realized, wow, there's nobody here that's speaking on our behalf. And occasionally you'll have a membership organization that we pay to be part of, that will have a lobbyist or someone there at these meetings, but there's definitely not enough representation for the consumers or for the providers. And that is something that is open to the public. I think more people just have to become aware of it, and they have to make the effort to attend. And it is an effort, because most people, they have to take off work, they have to travel. And quite frankly, they're not the most entertaining meetings to be in. And so, you have to have the passion to get involved.
Yeah, well, I think it's so important that you are out here advocating for people to come advocate for themselves at these public meetings, because it's not necessarily something I would have known about. And I'm sure a lot of people will hopefully take the opportunity now, after knowing about these public meetings, to come and advocate for their constituents and for themselves. And you've touched on this a little bit already, but in your role as an executive board member of the American Senior Housing Association, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities that you see in the senior housing industry today?
Wow, that is a huge question we could talk all day about. But again, I think generally speaking, the aging population in and of itself, there's so many people aging. And so I think accessibility is a big issue to proper housing programs and services. There's tons of housing and programs and services out there, but in our country, there's a huge gap that exists in the ability for all people to have access. There's a lot of opportunities out there, believe it or not, for those that are what would be considered, that have very little. Maybe in the poverty level, you might use that classification. I think our country, obviously, we could always do better, but we do a pretty good job at providing access to services for those that really don't have much. And those that have a lot, the top 10 or 15% of our country, they can afford just about any type of service nowadays, wherever they want. But there's this huge growing sector. It's the largest sector that we refer to as the middle market. And it's a broad sector, and there's not enough resources out there, both on the housing side and on the services side. And in our industry, there's a lot of talk, but it's challenging, because it's not necessarily something that is, in my opinion, just something that the government, we can rely on them to fix. And it's not something that just the private sector is going to fix. It's going to require people coming together and aligning and realizing that everyone needs to have access to adequate healthcare and to services. And quite frankly, I don't believe, and this may be an unpopular opinion, I don't think everybody can have the exact same housing programs and services, but there should be good quality housing programs and services. For example, I know I will never be able to probably afford some things that I would like to have, and that are on the wish list, but basic housing programs and services, I think as the population ages, we're going to have a crisis because there's just not enough out there for the different price points. And I think that's a very complex issue that we won't solve on this podcast, that's for sure.
Yeah, would be nice though. Yeah, I completely agree. There is obviously room for improvement across the entire socioeconomic spectrum, but especially in this middle group who are priced out from private care options and not qualifying for government supported resources, we are witnessing just a huge gap, and that's resulting in family members leaving the workforce to provide the care themselves, or draining their savings to afford for a limited time these options. So there definitely is a huge need here. And I could talk about this with you for quite a while, but I do want to get into Pedal for Alzheimer's. Can you tell us a bit about this nonprofit?
Yeah, it's an exciting passion project. So, that is an organization that started just as an idea to pay really a tribute to someone that I deeply respected, and that was a women's basketball coach, Pat Summitt. She died with Alzheimer's, and when she was diagnosed, she did as typical Pat fashion. She took the fight to Alzheimer's publicly. She was very outspoken, and I was really impressed that she set up a foundation and made a lot of efforts that she knew she would never receive the benefit of, and to help other people. It was a really selfless act, and to use her influence far after she would be with us on this earth. And so shortly after she died in 2016, I was trying to think of something that I could do myself that would benefit the foundation that she had set up for Alzheimer's research and treatment. And so I created an event called Pedal for Pat. We rode 1,098 miles from Knoxville down to Key West to honor her 1,098 NCAA career basketball wins. And I never knew that would become as popular as it did. But when we announced that event, I was planning to just kind of do the ride by myself. But next thing you know, USA Today and Sports Illustrated, ESPN picked up the story, and a lot of people wanted to join. We did that successfully and gave away $100,000 from that first event. And people said, well, you should keep doing this. And so we set up a nonprofit, a 501c3 called Pedal for Alzheimer's. So fast forward about 5 years later now, we have a board. We have 30 ambassadors across the country representing 13 states. My family of companies at Solinity manage and market, do all the public relations and everything pro bono. We've never taken a dime and never will, to ensure that every dollar that's spent can go to organizations and research for helping find a cure for Alzheimer's, to educate on the topic, and to also help the people that are suffering now with Alzheimer's, and professional and family caregivers. So our organization helps to fund a lot of different organizations and causes related to Alzheimer's on a regular basis. And every year it's grown, and we hope to continue to do that. And it's a really meaningful thing to us. It's a lot of work, and more than I ever dreamed it would be. But I think we've been able to accomplish some good things from it. And for me personally, people have asked, why do you keep doing that? It's like, I've always supported Alzheimer's causes, the Alzheimer's Association. And, me as an individual, if I give, there's only so much I can do personally. But if my influence can help to rally other people to get involved, and I think now we're almost at the $1 million mark. Well, me personally, I could have never given $1 million, but I've leveraged the influence in my teams to help raise $1 million. So for me, that feels good. And I think it's something that I should be doing, and why I'm involved in it.
Wow. Well, Pat was certainly an incredible woman, and it is amazing that you have continued to honor her legacy and raise awareness and support for Alzheimer's research. So thank you for all of the important work that you have done and are continuing to do. $1 million is incredible. I guess to kind of wrap us out, we have a lot of students on the platform who listen to this podcast and are looking for advice as they are entering the healthcare space. So what advice would you have for students considering entering the senior living and kind of geriatric healthcare industries?
Well, selfishly, I would say everybody should consider it. And I would say this, and I tell people as I've had the opportunity to speak to students at universities and high schools and around the country, most people don't really understand what senior living is and all the opportunities. A lot of people just have a stereotype of maybe a nursing home, or they think if you work in the industry, you're just going to be a caregiver, and maybe they don't want to be a caregiver. Maybe they want to do something else. And I tell people, when you think about our aging population, no matter what field of study you do at a university, at a college, or anywhere, at some point with our aging population, no matter what product or service you represent or work with or work for, you're going to be working with an aging population. And our industry kind of represents the spear tip of that. And so whether it's more on the real estate and finance, accounting, management, it's not always just work at a community. So there is a huge, vibrant, growing industry, and we need bright individuals that are passionate about helping people, caring for people. And I would say one challenge of our industry that we're working hard to do better at is making opportunities and learning about the industry more accessible. The platform that we've just recently launched at Solinity Leadership was just that. Our boot camp program is a 1-week live, work in a community program, not necessarily to train anyone for any one specific job, but to give people a snapshot of what working in the industry is. And so you can see, no matter whether you work at a corporate office overseeing lots of communities, whether you're in finance or whatever, it all centers around what happens in the communities and in the homes caring for residents. And so, I would say dig in and consider it. And if you're not sure about it, find something like Solinity Leadership. There's several associations out there that you can get more information. And obviously we would love to share anytime anybody would want to have just a conversation to learn what opportunities are in the industry or how someone could potentially launch or find out more. We're constantly looking to help launch people into our industry, not just to work for Solinity, but to help work with other organizations. And we need all of the people involved that would like to get involved.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for sharing today. This all sounds really incredible, and I'm excited for all of our listeners to hear all about your work. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Yeah, it's been an honor, Leah. Thank you for the work that you do.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Future of Caregiving, brought to you by Care Yaya. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration into the world of caregiving and that you've learned something new and valuable. If you want to stay up to date on all things caregiving, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. And don't forget to check out careyaya.org, where we're dedicated to improving the future of caregiving through technology and compassion. From all of us here at Care Yaya, thank you for tuning in.